Today, we're going to go over a massive situation that was brought to light regarding a large Roblox developer known as MiniToon, who's well known for creating a popular game called Piggy. But recently, a massive amount of evidence was recently uncovered that completely dives into a deeply concerning history surrounding his past actions and how he engaged in an extremely inappropriate and manipulative dynamic with a younger minor. Now this is a very serious situation that needs to be addressed, so please like and hype this video so more people are aware. Now to begin, we're going to look through exactly what was uncovered in this situation. So the first thing we'll cover revolves around a specific timeline and the ages of the individuals involved back in the year 2018. During this time, MiniToon was 16 years old and he began talking to a girl who was only years old. So now you've established that there's a problematic age gap of over 3 years between a 16-year-old and a year-old, which will be very important to take into consideration moving forward. Now this is where things take a very dark turn, because the chat logs from the private Discord conversations show exactly how much MiniToon knew and how he chose to proceed anyway. In early July of 2018, the minor explicitly stated her age in the chat by saying she was and MiniToon actually responded by asking if that was bad, and then stated that he just hoped she was not too worried about talking to someone as old as him. So this completely proves that he was fully aware of the 3-year age gap and understood that it could be seen as a problem, but he decided to continue pursuing this dynamic regardless. He even told her his exact age and joked that he trusted she would not do anything dumb with that knowledge. And the way MiniToon behaved in his private messages was absolutely problematic because he sent messages engaging in extremely inappropriate physical roleplay and pet play on a constant basis. He would type out actions describing himself secretly kissing her or jumping into her bed and asking if there was room for him. And throughout these chat sessions, he constantly escalated the conversations to focus on physical intimacy. So MiniToon would constantly type out actions where he was pinning her down on the bed or tackling her and trapping her in blankets to cuddle. In one specific exchange, he typed out that he would let her lick him so he could pet her more, and then stated that he was pinning her down harder. And the explicit conversations they had were so extreme for a to process because he was openly talking about giving her his first kiss and making comments about licking her lips and treating her like a literal pet, which would be a massive red flag when it comes to how significant the power imbalance turns out to be in this situation. But the lack of boundaries for MiniToon was extremely glaring because he pivoted to talking about long-term commitment and future plans instead of actually stepping back and realizing he was talking to someone who's literally in middle school. And it gets even worse because MiniToon encouraged the idea of them meeting up in real life, and he would constantly flood her with compliments, calling her beautiful and cute after she sent him selfies. He even offered to buy her things like Robux to keep her attached to him and make her feel like she owed him something. And later on, MiniToon posted incredibly concerning messages where he started conditioning her to the idea of marriage. He openly discussed how he had no interest in dirty stuff until marriage, but told her that if their relationship magically happened to go far and they managed to make it to marriage, they could adopt a kid together. And immediately, you can see how manipulative this is because he's planted the idea of a lifelong commitment into the mind of someone who's significantly vulnerable and much younger than himself. He was creating a fantasy world where they would live together and raise a family, and overall, this is a very clear manipulative tactic used to make the victim feel completely dependent on the perpetrator for their future happiness. Now moving forward, we have to look at the actual impact this had on the victim herself, because years later, the victim came forward in a private group chat to share her stance on the situation and explain exactly how this dynamic affected her mental state. She stated clearly that there was an obvious power dynamic between them, which MiniToon took full advantage of, and she explained that she was an extremely depressed kid dealing with abusive parents at the very same time that MiniToon was messaging her. And if you take this into consideration with the fact that MiniToon knew about her mental state and about home life, you'll realize that this makes the situation so much worse, because he knew she was hurting and he still chose to tell her that she was the meaning of his life and that he would fix her life and take her away from all of her real world problems. And the victim herself confirmed that this behavior was manipulation at the very least, because he used his older age and his financial ability to buy her things to create an intense emotional bond that she cannot easily break away from. Now it is very important to understand that emotional manipulation does not only happen between adults and children, especially since the age gap is not the only reason why this relationship is very problematic. When a 16-year-old teenager locks in on a year-old who is actively struggling with severe mental health issues in a bad home environment, they're using a massive developmental advantage to isolate and control that younger person. The 13-year-old is looking for a way to escape their struggles, and the 16-year-old presents himself as a savior while simultaneously pushing inappropriate romantic and physical boundaries. And MiniToon executed this exact pattern where he used her vulnerability as a gateway to introduce weird pet play dynamics and marriage proposals, and he actively worked to make himself the most important person in her world. And there are multiple instances in which MiniToon fails to respect any sort of normal boundary for someone her age. He would constantly tell her how much he loved her and how he could not stop thinking about her. He even asked her how they would explain their relationship to his parents and suggested lying to them by saying she was just a friend from a previous school. He fully acknowledged that his own parents hated online dating and thought everyone online was a creep, but he still continued to plan secret ways for them to eventually meet up. So not only did MiniToon solicit a very close and romantic relationship from a vulnerable younger individual, but he was literally plotting ways for them to deceive his own parents so they could cross state lines and meet up in person. He conditioned this young person to believe that all of her problems would be solved if she just waited a few years for him to buy a plane ticket and fly her to see her. And the entire time he was doing this, he was wrapping it all up in the guise of being caring and supportive boyfriend, which makes it extremely difficult for a young victim to recognize the emotional abuse while it is actively happening to them. He would send messages saying things like kisses you back while she was clearly just trying to navigate a normal conversation. This is a textbook example of love bombing, where the older individual overwhelms the younger one with grand promises and extreme affection to guarantee their loyalty. He told her he would sleep with her all day if he had to, and that he would hold her tight and never let her feel sick. While these might sound like normal things for someone to say in an adult relationship, they're completely inappropriate to say to a year-old who lacks the emotional maturity to understand the weight of these promises. And the victim even compared her own experience to other massive online controversies involving relatively short age gaps to point out how the implications in the power dynamics are what really matter. She expressed how disgusting it was to her that people would try to defend a relationship between a high schooler and a middle schooler just because they're both technically at the time. The emotional damage affected on a does not just disappear simply because the person manipulating them was only 16. The trauma is still very real and manipulation is still very harmful. So all in all, this situation entirely exposes the fact that MiniToon engaged in deeply inappropriate emotional manipulation against a highly vulnerable individual. The evidence clearly shows a pattern of negligence regarding appropriate age boundaries and a deliberate effort to condition a younger individual into a long-term inappropriate dynamic. And as long as people refuse to acknowledge that older teenagers are fully capable of emotionally manipulating younger teenagers, many of these perpetrators will have yet to be held accountable for their actions that can have lasting effects on who they subject their inappropriate behavior to. We have to start holding people accountable for how they treat vulnerable kids online, regardless of whether or not they were also teenagers themselves at the time of the incidents. Because when situations like this are finally brought to light, it is incredibly crucial that the community actually listens to the victims instead of trying to find legal loopholes to defend the perpetrators. And it is absolutely disheartening to see how many people will immediately try to sweep these very real experiences under the rug just to protect the reputation of a popular game developer. So we really need to push back against this mindset, because prioritizing either a popular individual with a popular game or an action in general over the safety and mental well-being of an actual child is completely unacceptable. Now in my next video, we're going to dive much deeper into how other large figures in the community actively try to cover up this exact situation up and silence the victim, which goes to show how massive of a cover-up this turned out to be. So the story turns out to be even bigger than what was discussed in this video, so stay tuned for what's coming up next. And before I end off, I want to state that I do not condone harassment or hate towards anyone mentioned in this video. This video was meant for informative and educational purposes only. And with that being said, thank you for watching this video, and I will see you in the next one.